All right, the golden move that I think a lot of us really want to understand better is how are we supposed to hinge? So the first thing that I would say in hinging is understanding that we have multiple directions. We have a vertical hinge, we would have a vertical hinge that works this way, and we have a horizontal hinge that works this direction. Okay, so we have a combination of both. So one of the things that I like to stress to players, or the way that I would explain this, is we want to put it somewhere right in between. So this would be vertical, straight up and down at 90. This would be going too far inside. I would imagine right in here, if we had an alignment stick at a 45-degree angle off of our target line, that would be the direction that this is working. Now, this is just managing the wrist, so remember this. This is working up. We are going to have forearm rotation, we would call pronation of the lead forearm, which starts to bring this back to square right here. So when we go into managing the wrist, think of it this way. This is 90, this is our horizontal, this is in. We want to go right in between. Now, a lot of us, where you're going to feel this is in the lead wrist. So this right here is what we would call radial deviation. So if we can learn to radially deviate and add forearm rotation, we can see how that puts this perfectly parallel to where the target line is. So for the players that need to work on their takeaway, whether it be too far in, whatever it might be, hinge at 45, forearm to 90, where this is parallel to the target line. And go from there. That's one of my favorite places when I'm working on a takeaway to work this. So again, hinge 45, forearm gets it parallel to the target line. And we let it go from right there. So this is one of the things we're going to go into in this video here, is managing hinge, the different types of hinge that we might see and why we need it. Okay, so going into the types of hinge that we can have, and more than anything, what I want to use this video for is why we actually want to create angle in the wrists, and one of the ways that we can actually use this to manage both the backswing and the downswing, because I think it's important that whatever it is that we give players to work on, it also needs to relate to controlling low point a little bit better. So, and I do think that how we manage the wrist conditions here are very important. So when we go into type number 1, there is straight radial deviation. So this would be what we would call a vertical hinge right in here. Okay, so a vertical hinge would be straight radial deviation of the lead wrist right here. Okay. Now, we also have the ability to move the golf club horizontally, backwards or away from us, via flexion and ulnar deviation. So this would be a horizontal movement right here. And what we'll notice out of this is we're going to have a different relationship with the club face here. A lot of players, I would say right here, that go more the horizontal route, where they flex or they bow the lead wrist and they keep this in ulnar deviation. So we can see how that actually closes the club face here. That would actually be closing the club face to the leading edge of the shaft. Okay? That's probably going to make us draw it more. Now, one of the common patterns that we do see out of players that do this is they are usually shallowers of the golf club. And we can see shallowing is actually going to help reopen the club face in the downswing. This is not what I'm asking you to do in this video, just throwing that out there. So if I'm building what I would call a stock model takeaway for the player right here, we need to manage the vertical hinge along with the forearm rotation. These are going to be the two key points. And then we're going to show you a drill that we can use this for to help us manage low point and create better contact as well. So I think a lot of us struggle with getting the golf club inside. That's one of the things that I struggle with. So when we look at this, we're going to be going vertical hinge, but now what I would say is this would be straight ahead right here. What I want you to think about doing is make it 45 degrees. This would be 90 degrees or parallel to the target line, and this right here would be 90 degrees, which would be perpendicular to the target line. What I want you to think about right in here is making this a 45, and now what we have access to from a forearm standpoint is we have access to pronation. Now, I wouldn't confuse this with internal shoulder rotation. This is what I see too many of us right here. So let's make sure that it is just forearm rotation, which if I held my elbow right in here, this would be forearm rotation, and this would be our radial hinge. So having a visual, like me, I like having an alignment stick down here that would be parallel to my target line. So one, I can use the shaft right here to see what 45 is to that. I can see that on the ground. I add my forearm rotation to it. That's now parallel to the target line, and I'm going to actually just work on trying to feel what it's like to maintain this back and down right here. I think that's a really good use of why we would actually manage wrist conditions and the forearm movements the way that we do. Pretty simple. I think we can do a lot of that with a mirror, etc. Now, let's get into a drill that we can use this for to help us actually better low point. So when we look at players that struggle with hitting the golf ball, or I guess I should word this as throwing the golf club early coming into impact, what I like to use is, so I've got a yoga wedge right here, which is a little bit larger than the height of what the toe of my golf club would be with this iron right here. And how I have this positioned is I have this positioned 1 foot length and a half from the beginning of the golf ball backwards. So what I'm going to do, I have the ability now, I can still go 45, I can still bring this parallel to the ground, and now from here, if I release this early, I'm going to run into this. So what I like about this right here from a drill perspective is this is going to help me manage what I need to be doing here in the downswing. So I'm going to go 45 parallel to the target, work this up, and now this will show me as I'm working the arms back down to parallel to the target line, I'm going to be managing both the radial deviation of my lead wrist and the extension of my trail wrist with pressure forward, and now I can actually start to learn where I need to be pressure-wise to unload this golf club and make solid contact. That might be one of the very first places that you need to start, is just learning what it's like to actually hit the golf ball with that amount of angle in our wrists if we've been that early thrower our entire life. I probably wouldn't recommend going right into this at Mach 10. So you can see I started at that. I started this off pretty slow, and I really think one of the secrets right here for everybody is turn thoughts into feels. That is what we use practice swings for. Turn your thoughts into feels. I cannot stress that enough. So here we are, 45, forearm rotation to 90, work this back down with pressure forward, and what does that feel like to bring this golf club down to the ball without hitting this? What we'll notice is if all of our pressure is back, regardless of what we do, we're probably going to run into the yoga wedge right here. So here we go. We're going to hinge this 45, forearm rotation to 90, work this up, back down to parallel. There's 1, 2, there's 3. 1, 2, there's 3. So I know now, right in here, I know that I am actually getting the low point more forward. I'm catching the golf ball first. That'd be the first place I would start. Then I'd go into hitting some actual shots doing this. where I'm going to start this drill off is at our 45 forearm rotation to 90. I'm just going to manage it by hitting golf balls right there. So 45, forearm rotation to 90. And that right there, same thing to me. That felt really good. So this is one of the ways that we can use takeaway to help us manage low point and teach us the proper wrist conditions and how we would actually load the golf club to help us move low point more forward. So there's a drill, there's a great explanation of it. We're gonna go into some common flaws next. All right, so the most common flaws that I would say that I see out of poor takeaways right in here. Number one, I would say, is generally going to come from the player who has excessive internal shoulder rotation, because even if I haven't moved my forearm, if I internally rotate my shoulder, we can see what that's going to do to the club face. That is going to open the club face, and that is going to bring the golf club and send its mass in forward very early. If that mass gets sent in early, not saying that everybody would do this, but I think a lot of us now, as we start to try and get some energy into this actual golf club, the way that we would pressure it is unfortunately over the top, and that could start with how we're actually taking the golf club away. So the first piece that I would say right here is internally rotating the shoulder. Now, the next piece that I would go into, that I think a lot of us, that I've seen some players do a little bit too much of as well, is going into shoulder flexion. This would just be lifting. So we might see the golf club work out early, and I see this a lot of times with players who are trying to keep the club head outside the hands. While this is keeping the club head outside the hands, this is now disconnecting the arms, even the shoulder, from the body, and it's probably going to send the golf club back in early. So I see a lot of this out of players, and that typically turns into what we saw right there, which is a slice. Okay, so the ball didn't slice as much as I thought it was going to, but typically I would say that that's going to turn into more of a slice right there, and that's going to be from the player actually going into flexion of the shoulder, so lifting to try and keep the club head outside the hands, which then starts to bring the mass of the head back here behind the hands, and then where we see the golf club is probably going to change direction coming over the top, which is where we see players slice it. So those are probably the two most common flaws that I would say I see out of the takeaway. Make sure you're avoiding those if and only if they are wreaking havoc on your ball striking and they're not allowing you to control low point the way that you would like to. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave those in the comments down below, and I'll make sure I get back to each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video here. If you haven't, please click that subscribe button. You can also click the bell right there, and that's going to notify you every time that I release a new YouTube video. Also, if you haven't, check out that last video that I did. It's right here, pinned to the screen. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, any comments, please leave those below, and I will make sure I get back to each and every one of you. So, thank you again. Appreciate your support. We'll see you next time.